Okay, so today we are going to look at creating our mouse tail rig so that we can start our project that focuses on overlapping actions. So the first thing that we need to do is create a very basic mouse model that we can animate off of. So I want to open up Maya, get our normal screen going here, and our first thing is just going to be creating our cube. So create polygon primitives and go down to cube. So you'll see the cube 1 displays in our viewport. I want to go over to the right side where it says inputs polycube 1 and just select that. It should load some more options for you, and in there you should see subdivisions width, subdivisions height, and subdivisions depth. I'm just going to click and drag and highlight all three of those, and then middle mouse click in my viewport and pull myself to the right so that I can get my subdivisions up to around 4. 4 should work for us today for this model because it's pretty simple and that's more than we're going to need. So once I have that, if you select it, I'm going to turn my wireframe on shaded on. And then you want to just select your cube, go up to the top, and let's rename that mouse. Okay. So we now have our mouse. So let's actually model this a little bit and shape it so that it has that rough shape of a mouse so it looks a little more realistic. So I'm just going to go into my side view first, and we're just going to start shaping this. So you guys can really do this however you want it. You can kind of follow my lead if you'd like, but your mouse does not have to look like mine by any means. So I'm going to pull my bottom vertices out a little bit, and I'm going to kind of go for that hot air balloon shape in a way. So I'm going to pull this one out, but not as far. I'm going to dip this one in a tiny bit. And then my top, I'm going to pull way in, and I'm also going to pull it down. And then I just want to pull my middle vertices up a little bit. And that should be what I'm looking for there. So it's looking a little bit better. Let's adjust some of the other sides as well. So if we go into our front view, just going to kind of do the same exact thing in here. And you can adjust it for however you want it. Like I said, it can look exactly how you want. There are no rules on that. So I'm not going to do this one as much because this is our side. So it's not going to be as drastic. So that looks good. Okay. I want to right click, go into my object mode on my cube or on my mouse, and I'm going to go into scale. I want to scale the entire thing in a little bit, make it a little bit thinner. The mouse is just a little wide, and I want to pull him down a little bit as well. So it's starting to look a little bit better. So I'm going to go back into my views. The last view I kind of want to go adjust is just my top view. And all that we want to do in here is grab our corners. So if we just grab all 4 of them, actually, we should be able to pull them in a little bit. And that should help. And then pull them down a little bit there. Okay. So that looks pretty good. That's really all that we're going to need for our mouse shape here. I may pull the front out a little bit more just so it kind of distinguishes itself as being the front. So if we go into our top view, actually, we'll do it in here. And we can grab just these front vertices and go into our transform and pull that out a little bit. Actually, let me redo that. I don't want to pull that top one. So we'll pull that out like that. We can pull these ones next to it out a little bit to kind of round that shape off. And that looks pretty good. I might even pull the back backwards a little bit so that it's just a little bit changed. There we go. Alright, so if I go into object mode now, there's kind of more of a distinction between the front and the back. I'm going to make my mouse a little bit shorter, so go into my scale and move him down a little bit there. That looks good. Okay, and then if you click 3 on your keyboard, it'll put you in more of a smoothed out view. So you can kind of just get your rough shape. I mean, that's really all that we're looking for as far as our mouse goes. We don't need anything crazy. So I'm going to click my mouse again, click number 1 so that I'm back in that first view. And we can start to create the tail. So to create the tail, it's a pretty basic shape that we want. We just want a sphere, and then we're going to extrude some faces out to kind of get the rest of the tail. We'll duplicate it a few times and set this up so that we can really work that overlapping action. So I'm going to create my sphere first. So hold down spacebar, create in my polygons. I'm just going to click sphere. It's obviously going to be way too big as of right now, so let's scale it way down. If you click 4 on your keyboard, you can go into wireframe mode. That might help you just get it to the correct size. So I'm going to scale it down to maybe something around here. When I think I have it where I want it, I'm going to go into my front view, which is actually my side view in this rig that we're creating. When I get in here, I'm just going to click 4, same idea. I'm going to click W so that I can move, and I'm going to pull this up to the back of my mouse. So there's no exact science on where that needs to go. Leave yourself some room. So you want maybe around half of it to be up top and around half of it to be underneath as well. And then you should be good. So if I go back into my perspective view and I click 5 on our keyboard, it should load our texture again and show us the beginning of our tail. So that's about the right size. If I have that how I want it, now we want to extrude those faces out so that we can kind of form the rest of the tail and really get that shape in there. So if I select the sphere and I just zoom in a little bit here, I am only going to extrude out this layer right here of faces. So I'm just going to select all of them real quick, and there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. Whatever's the quickest for you to select all of these faces will work. And to put your tail in face mode, you just want to select it as an object. If you right click, go down to face, and then you should be good. Same idea as when we go in and mess with the vertices in the vertex mode. The face mode is just another way to work on your models. So if I have all of those faces selected, what we then want to do is click Shift and right click. So hold down Shift and then right click on your mouse and go down to Extrude Face, which in Maya 2017 is right underneath for me. So when you have that, it's going to load what looks like just a transform tool with maybe the scale options ahead of it. And then you'll see the circle going around it. That's the rotate. But then on the top right, what I can see here is there's also this little handle, which I'm going to work with here. So right now, if I were to move my faces out, it wouldn't actually be pulling from the center. And you can see where that's lined up. But if I select this little handle, it's going to center us out, which is what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to grab this the green handle there, and I'm just going to pull our tail up. And I'm going to pull it up, I don't know, maybe till around there so that it's got a good amount of distance. You probably want the distance to be just about as the length of the ball. Obviously, it wouldn't be the width, but just about the length will work. And you can always adjust it after. If it's too big or not big enough, it's not a big deal. So once you have the face extruded, you can just click Q and select off, and I'm going to go back into object mode. So now, if we were to look at it, we have our base of our mouse, and then we have our first section of our tail. And to work on our overlapping actions that we want to work on for this project, we're going to actually want 3 different sections of that tail that we can animate off of. So I'm going to select this first object that we just made, and I'm just going to rename this tail 01. Oh, if I can type. There we go. Okay. Select that tail 01. I'm going to go into my side view again. Turn on my wireframe unshaded. And I'm just going to duplicate this out 2 more times. So if you select it and just click Command D, it'll duplicate. Click W and you can move that new piece up. And then I'm going to duplicate it 1 more time. So same idea. You should already have it selected. Just Command D and pull it up so that they look about even. And that looks pretty good. So my section here and here are looking around the same. like I said, it's not a big deal if they're not exactly even, but just kind of eyeball it and make sure you have it in the right spot. The nice thing about just doing the duplication like we just did with our mouse tail is that it should have already renamed those couple new sections. So we already have tail 03, tail 02, tail 01, and our mouse. So that is actually exactly what we're looking for. And that is all the geometry that we're going to need for our mouse. So I want to select everything there. So just drag a box over everything, modify, and let's freeze transformations just so everything is zeroed out and we do not have to worry about it anymore. Okay. So now let's start messing with our outliner a little bit and getting things in the correct spot. So Windows down to outliner, and let's take a look at our outliner real quick. So I'm going to just select all of the geometry that we just had and do a Command G. It should group that for us. Let's select that and just put in Geo. So now if I open up that Geo layer, we have the mouse, the tail 01, the tail 02, and the tail 03. So that looks good. And if you have that looking exactly how I have it here, we can then move on to start creating our actual controls, which is what we will want to be animating off of. So I'm going to close my outliner out. We are going to come back to it in a little while, but we don't need it just yet. So we're going to want to create 4 different handles for our mouse rig. We want a master move that will control everything, and then we want an individual handle on each section of the tail. So first things first, let's create that master move. So if I hold down spacebar, go to create, NURBS primitives this time, and then down on the bottom, I'm just going to select circle. So it actually put a pretty decent sized shape already around our mouse. I'm just going to rename it, first thing first, master move. Okay. I'm going to go into my top view just so I can get a better look at this and get it sized correctly. So I'm going to scale mine down a little bit. And the other thing I'm going to do actually is right click. So I want to select my master move, right click, and go into control vertex. And here, just like on our polygon when we were just adjusting our cube to kind of be shaped more like a mouse, we can do the same thing with this control. So with our control vertex, I'm going to select just the top and bottom vertices, and I'm just going to scale them in a little bit. I just don't need it as wide as it was setting itself up to be. So that looks good for me. I'm just going to click off of it and go back in my perspective view, and now we should be good. So the only other thing that you'll notice is that currently it's not lined up with the bottom of our mouse. So in order to do that, let's just go into one of our other views, say our front view here. If I zoom in a little bit to our tab or to our mouse body, I can select our master move and just drag it all the way down. Eyeball it where you think it should go, and then it should be good. So now we've created our master move, and when we end up kind of rigging this a little bit later on, that master move will actually create or help move everything throughout the entire mouse. Okay. So if I select that master move, I go up to modify. I'm just going to freeze transformations on that now that I have it placed. And then the next thing we need to do is can create our tail controls. So the same process that we just used to create that master move, we just want to do it again. So if I go into create, into our NURBS primitives, down to circle, it's going to create that same circle it created before. This time I'm going to scale it down a little bit more. I'm going to move it to the side here so I can see it. I'm also going to go into my rotate, and I want to rotate my X value to 90. Okay. So if I go into my front view again, we should be able to line this tail control up with our first tail geometry layer. So if I scale it down, I'm just going to get it maybe a little bit smaller than what I have here. I just want it to overlap, to wrap around just the ball part of the tail. So that looks pretty good how it is there. I'm then just going to select it, and I'm going to type in tail control 01. And I spelled control wrong. There we go. All right, so if we look at our perspective view, it should also have centered itself, just because how we've created our stuff, we haven't moved anything really around, so it's going to automatically be centered. If yours isn't, make sure that you are going to kind of roughly center it. So once we have that created, let's select it. And the same process that we did when we created our actual tail geometry, we want to use for our tail control. So our Command D will duplicate. It'll already change our name to tail control 02. I can select it and I can pull it up and duplicate it again, and then pull that up for tail control 03. All right. So this would be a great spot to save if you have not been saving already, because at this point now, we have actually created all of our controls. So if we have all of our controls created, which we should at this point, I want to reopen up that outliner. So Windows, down to outliner. And now we can take a look and clean this up and actually get our rigging going. So we already have created our geometry group. I want to do the same thing with our controls. So I'm just going to select all 4 of our controls in my outliner, click Command G, and it will group it. Double click on that and just name it controls. All right. So now we should have a controls group, which includes our master move, our tail control 01, 02, and 03. And then we should have our geometry group, which contains our mouse, our tail 01, our tail 02, and our tail 03. So I'm going to close both of these down real quick. And then I'm just going to select both of them. So Shift select your geometry group and your controls group, and Command G. Okay. I'm going to rename our our main group mouse. And now when we look at it, we have our mouse layer, or our mouse group. Inside that group, we have our controls and we have our geometry. So we're getting there, and we almost have this exactly how we want it, but it's not there yet. So the one thing I want to do first is I just want to rearrange the hierarchy in our control group. And it's fairly simple. So all I'm going to do is select tail control 1, middle mouse click, and drag it on top of the master move. It should kind of load it in. It'll hide it for a second, but if you go over and you click that plus sign, our tail control 1 now should branch off of our master move. And if that works, I'm going to do the same exact thing for tail control 2 onto tail control 1. And then the same thing for tail control 3 onto tail control 2. All right, so now our controls group looks a little bit different. It's got the master move, which then goes into the tail control 01, onto 02, and onto 03. So that looks good. Now if I were to select, say, just our tail control 01 and look at it in our view and rotate it, it should bring the other two with you. And that is exactly what we want. So the only thing that we're missing now is when I were to actually do that and rotate this back, it's obviously not bringing our geometry with us. So we just need to group that geometry with those controls, and then we will be completely rigged. So the first thing that we're going to do is group our master move, or constrain our master move. So if I select our master move, and then I shift select our mouse body, I'm going to minimize my outliner. I'm going to put myself on animation mode. You guys might be in modeling or a different mode, so put yourself in animation over on the top left. And now I've shift selected my master move first, then my mouse body. I'm going to go up to Constrain, and I'm going to click the parent option box. Make sure maintain offset is on, and click apply. Okay. Then I want to select my master move again and select my mouse body one more time. Go up to Constrain, and this time, rather than using a parent like we just used, I'm going to use a scale and just click scale. So now we've constrained our master move in two different ways with our mouse body. And I want to then do the same exact thing for tail control 1, tail control 2, and tail control 3 to the corresponding tail geometry layers that they would be grouped with. The one thing that I did not do yet is freeze my transformation. So before we constrain anything, I want you to select all 3 tail controls and go to modify and freeze transformation. Let's just zero everything out. It'll help us avoid any issues that we might run into later. And then we can start. So then select tail control 1, and it will look like the other ones are loaded as well, but trust me, just select tail control 1. Select tail 01, which is that first tail geometry layer. Go up to Constrain Parent, and then Constrain Scale. The settings should already be set from what we did with our master move. We're going to use the same one, so you should be able to just do it fairly quick. And then do the same thing for tail control 02. So select that, shift select tail 02, constrain parent, constrain scale, and do it for our top. So select tail control 3, shift select tail 03, constrain parent, and constrain scale. So assuming that worked, let's take a look at our outliner one more time. And now in our outliner, if I were to break our geometry down a little bit, you can see each of those constraints. So under your mouse, you should have a parent constraint and then a scale constraint. And you should see that same thing under tail 01, tail 02, and tail 03. Our controls should look exactly like they did before, because we actually didn't really go in and adjust anything with them other than changing their hierarchy earlier on. So if that looks how you want it, I can close my outliner, and let's test out our rig and just make sure that it's working. So if I select our master move and then I just click W, I can go into our transform tool or translate, and I'm just going to pull my mouse around a little bit. So if you look, and I'm pulling his X value, the tail and all the geometry comes with the master move. So that is exactly what we want. The other thing that you'd want to test, so I'm going to pull it forward a little bit, is you just want to test each tail control. So if I were to select these, they should never move as far as the translate goes. They should only rotate. So I'm going to click E, and mine rotate Z. So my tail control 01 should rotate Z for the rest of the tail. As you can see, mine works, so that's good. I'm going to keep it back a little bit. I'm going to select tail control 02 and just double check my rotate on that. That looks good there. And double check tail control 3. Assuming they all rotate on their own, but if you select tail control 01, they all come together. That means that everything is working properly. The other thing you should have is if you do select your master move and move them around, they should stay in that shape that you've set them at. If all of that's working, make sure you save, because that is what we're going to be doing for our mouse rig. So I'm going to smooth mine out. I'm just going to select my geometry and click 3. Just really on my body. The rest of it's not too bad. And then we have our mouse that we're looking at. So if I were to select all of my controls, I just want to zero everything out and put my mouse back in the middle. Save that file. And then we are in a good spot to actually start animating. So if you have that looking good, your outliner, let me load mine back up so you can see it one more time. Okay. Your outliner looks how mine looks here. You should have the two groups. You should have your mouse, and then inside your mouse you should have your controls group and your geometry group. In your controls group, your hierarchy should have your master move followed by your tail control, followed by tail control 01, 02, 03. And your geometry group should have your mouse, which is your body, tail 01, 02, and 03. And then on each individual geometry, you should have a parent constraint and a scale constraint. If all of that matches up with mine, your rig should be working the same way. And with that said, you guys should be good to start animating and working on your overlapping action.